She never thought she'd see him again, and she definitely didn't expect him to humiliate her in front of a crowd. Aria stood frozen in the center of Northridge Mall's atrium, shopping bags slipping from her trembling fingers as her ex-boyfriend's voice echoed off the marble floors. Connor Matthews, charming, successful, untouchable, stood 15 feet away with his new girlfriend draped on his arm, pointing at Aria like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "That's her," he announced to the small crowd gathering near the fountain. "The girl who thought she could trap me with a pregnancy scare." Pathetic, right? It wasn't true. None of it was true. But Connor had always been good at rewriting history, and in that moment, surrounded by strangers with their phones out, Aria felt herself disappearing into the lie he was telling. She'd loved him once, believed him when he said they'd build something real together. Then she'd discovered the other women, the money he'd stolen from her savings, the way he'd convinced her own friends she was unstable, jealous, broken. She'd left him 6 months ago with nothing but her dignity. Now he was taking that too. What Connor didn't know, what no one in that crowd could possibly know, was that the man standing 20 feet behind Aria, pretending to browse a storefront window, wasn't a random shopper. He was her husband. And he didn't forgive insults to his wife. If you're just finding this channel, welcome to Best Heart Stories, where love isn't soft, it's dangerous. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're already here, you know what kind of story this is going to be. The crowd had grown larger now, a semicircle of faces illuminated by phone screens, all angled toward Connor like he was putting on a performance. And he was. This was what he did best, turning private pain into public spectacle, feeding off the attention like it gave him life. His girlfriend giggled beside him, her phone raised high, capturing every angle of Aria's humiliation. "Remember when she showed up at my place at 2 in the morning, Connor continued, his voice carrying across the atrium with practiced ease. "Crying about how I didn't love her anymore. Like I owed her something just because we dated for a year." His girlfriend chimed in, her voice saccharine sweet. "A year? That's not even that long." Connor laughed, squeezing her waist. "Exactly, babe. Some people just can't let go." Aria's knees felt weak. The marble beneath her feet seemed to tilt, the entire world narrowing to this single excruciating moment. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to scream that none of this was real. But her voice had abandoned her, trapped somewhere behind the tightness in her throat. The memories came flooding back unbidden, sharp and unwelcome. Connor's apartment at 2 in the morning, but not the way he was describing it. She'd gone there to get her grandmother's necklace back, the one he'd borrowed to give to another woman. She'd been calm, composed, asking quietly for the one thing that mattered. He'd laughed at her then too, told her she was being dramatic, that she cared more about a piece of jewelry than their relationship. The gaslighting had been so smooth, so effortless. By the time she'd left that night, she'd actually apologized to him. That was Connor's gift. He could make you question your own reality, twist your memories until you weren't sure what was true anymore. The money he'd borrowed, $3,000 from her savings, for a business investment that never materialized. When she'd asked about it, he'd acted offended, hurt that she didn't trust him. Eventually, she'd stopped asking. The friends who'd slowly distanced themselves, one by one, after Connor had privately told them she was jealous, controlling, that he was worried about her mental health. She hadn't known about those conversations until after they'd broken up, when one friend finally admitted what he'd been saying behind her back. And the text messages, God, the text messages. They'd continued for months after she'd left. 3 in the morning, her phone lighting up with his name. "I miss you. Why are you doing this to us? You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do. You're making a mistake." Each message a small invasion, a reminder that even in leaving, she hadn't really escaped. Have you ever had someone humiliate you in public? That moment when you realize everyone's watching and no one's helping? Drop a comment if you know that feeling. Connor was still talking, his voice rising with theatrical emotion. "I tried to be patient with her," he said, shaking his head with false sympathy. "But there's only so much crazy a guy can handle, you know." The crowd murmured, some laughing, some nodding. A few looked uncomfortable but said nothing. That was the worst part, Aria thought distantly. Not the people who enjoyed her pain, but the ones who witnessed it and chose silence. Then she felt it. A presence behind her, different from the watching crowd. Warm, solid, deliberate. A hand settled on her shoulder, gentle but unmistakably possessive, and every nerve in her body went still. The touch was familiar now after 3 months of marriage, but it still sent electricity down her spine. "Are you ready to go, wife?" The word dropped into the atrium like a stone into still water. Wife. The crowd's energy shifted immediately, whispers rippling outward like waves. Phones that had been focused on Connor now swung toward Aria and the man behind her. Connor's voice faltered mid-sentence, his practiced performance interrupted. His eyes went wide, confusion flickering across his face before he masked it with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Wife. Aria, what the hell is this?" Some kind of what, rebound? Desperation. Dante stepped around Aria, placing himself between her and Connor with a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed. Up close, the difference between the two men was unmistakable. Connor was tall, fit, conventionally handsome in the way that came from expensive haircuts and gym memberships. But Dante was something else entirely. He wore power the way other men wore cologne, effortlessly, impossible to ignore. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, the kind that didn't come from department stores. His presence didn't demand attention, it commanded it, and the crowd instinctively took a step back. "You should delete that video," Dante said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "And the ones your girlfriend is posting. Now." Connor's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes flickered. "Or what, man? You're gonna sue me? This is a free country, I can say whatever I want. I'm not going to sue you." Dante took a single step forward, and Connor's girlfriend actually flinched. The crowd had gone completely silent now, sensing the shift from entertainment to something far more dangerous. "I'm going to give you a choice," Dante continued in that same calm tone. "Delete everything, apologize to my wife, and never speak her name again. Or," he paused, letting the silence stretch taut, "I'll make sure every business associate, client, and investor you have knows exactly what kind of man you are. The real story, not the one you tell online." Connor's face went pale, but he held his ground. "You don't know anything about me, I know enough." Dante's smile was the coldest thing Aria had ever seen. "I know about the property deals you've been structuring through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The investors' money you've been moving. I know about Madison, the girlfriend you had before this one. The one who's still waiting for you to pay back the $42,000 you borrowed for your quote-unquote investment opportunity. I know about the 3 different women you were seeing while you were with Aria, including your business partner's wife. Shall I continue?" The girlfriend's head whipped toward Connor, her phone lowering slowly. The crowd's energy had changed completely now, the entertainment value replaced by uncomfortable voyeuristic fascination. Connor's hands curled into fists at his sides, then released. His jaw worked, muscles twitching beneath his skin. "You're bluffing. Try me." Those 2 words carried more threat than any elaborate speech could have. They hung in the air between the 2 men, and Aria watched Connor's face as he calculated, weighed his options, and realized with visible horror that he was outmatched. Connor pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. The crowd watched as he opened his social media, found the videos he'd just posted, and deleted them one by one. His girlfriend stared at him, recognition slowly dawning on her face that everything he'd just said about Aria might have been a lie. When Connor looked up again, his face was a mask of barely controlled rage and humiliation. "Done. Good." Dante reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, extending it toward Connor. "If you ever need to reach my wife for any reason, you'll go through me. But I strongly suggest you find a reason not to." Connor didn't take the card. He turned without another word and walked away, his girlfriend hesitating for only a moment before hurrying after him, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, already pulling out their phones to text friends about what they'd just witnessed. Aria stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Dante turned to face her, his expression softening slightly, though his eyes remained unreadable. "Let's go home." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and let him guide her toward the exit, his hand returning to the small of her back. That touch, light as it was, felt like ownership. In the parking garage, the silence was deafening. Dante's car, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Aria had made in the last 3 years, sat in a reserved spot near the elevator. He opened the passenger door for her, waited until she was settled, then closed it with a soft click that sounded final, like the closing of a chapter. He slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, but didn't immediately pull out of the space. The underground garage was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent lights that cast strange shadows across his face. "How did you know where I was?" Arya finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's hands rested on the steering wheel, and for a long moment he didn't answer. "Then I always know where you are." It should have frightened her. Maybe it did. But there was something else underneath the fear, something that felt dangerously close to relief. "You had him investigated," she said. Not a question. "I have everyone investigated." He glanced at her briefly, and for the first time since they'd married, she saw something other than careful neutrality in his expression. But him? "I've been watching him since the day you signed our contract." "Why?" "Because men like Connor don't stop. They circle back. They test boundaries. And I needed to know exactly how to destroy him when he inevitably came for what's mine." "What's mine?" Those words settled over Arya like a blanket, warm and suffocating at once. This was never just a business arrangement, was it? Dante pulled out of the parking space, navigating the garage with practiced ease. The contract was real. "But the reasons I offered it to you, those were more complicated than I let you believe." "What does that mean?" He turned onto the street, merging into early evening traffic. The city lights were just beginning to flicker on, Chicago transforming into its nighttime self, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. "It means," Dante said carefully, "that I didn't choose you because you needed protection, Arya. I chose you because the moment I saw him break you, I decided you'd never belong to anyone but me. And I've spent 3 months making sure you'd have nowhere else to go." The truth settled over her like ice water, sharp and clarifying. The marriage. The protection. The careful distance he'd maintained. It wasn't kindness. It was patience. And Connor's humiliation at the mall hadn't been an accident Dante stumbled upon. It was the trap finally springing closed. If someone offered you total protection from your worst fear, but you had no idea what you were really agreeing to, would you sign? Hit subscribe if you want to see where this goes, because it gets so much darker. The drive to their home, Dante's home, took 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. Arya stared out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to the wealthy enclave where Dante's estate sat behind high walls and iron gates. She thought about the past 3 months, replaying every moment through this new, horrifying lens. It had started 4 months ago, back when she'd still been drowning. Working double shifts at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago, where the cheapest entree cost more than her daily wage. Living in a studio apartment with a broken heater, jumping every time she heard footsteps in the hallway, afraid Connor had found her again. The text messages had still been coming then, 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes apologetic, sometimes angry, always insistent. "You're being dramatic. I miss you. Why are you ignoring me? We were good together. You're making a mistake." She'd changed her number twice, but he always found the new one. That's when Dante had first appeared. A Friday night in late September, the restaurant half empty because of the rain. He'd walked in without a reservation, and somehow the host had given him the best table in the house without question. That should have been her first clue that he wasn't ordinary. Arya had been assigned to his section by chance, or so she'd thought. He'd ordered the osso buco and a glass of Barolo, barely glanced at the menu, and spent most of the meal working on a laptop. She'd refilled his wine once, brought his food, asked if everything was satisfactory. He'd said yes. Nothing more. But the next Friday he was back. Same table, same order. The host greeted him by name, Mr. Morelli, and Arya noticed the way the other waitstaff gave his table a wide berth, like they knew something she didn't. The third Friday he'd spoken to her beyond the usual pleasantries. "You seem tired," he'd said, his dark eyes studying her face in a way that made her feel exposed. "I'm fine," she'd replied automatically. She wasn't fine. Connor had found her new number 2 days earlier, and the messages had escalated. "I saw you at the grocery store. You looked good. Why are you avoiding me? Do you have someone new? You know you belong with me. You're lying." Dante had said it so matter-of-factly that Arya had actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Excuse me. You're not fine. You're exhausted. And you're afraid." She should have been offended, should have walked away. But something in his voice, calm and certain, made her pause. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. And then he'd gone back to his meal as if the conversation had never happened, leaving Aria rattled and confused. The fourth Friday, she'd almost called in sick, unnerved by the intensity of his attention. But rent was due, and she couldn't afford to miss a shift. When she approached his table he'd already ordered, the waiter looking slightly terrified as he scurried away. Dante had gestured to the seat across from him. Sit. I'm working, she'd protested weakly. Sit, he'd repeated, and something in his tone made it clear it wasn't a request. She'd sat, her heart hammering. What do you want from me? A simple question with a complicated answer. He'd studied her for a long moment, and she'd felt like he was seeing past her skin, reading her fears like they were written on her bones. I want to offer you a way out. Out of what? Whatever it is that makes you check the door every time it opens. Whatever makes you flinch when someone raises their voice. Whoever sends you those text messages that make your hands shake. She'd felt tears prick her eyes and hated herself for it. I don't need your help. Everyone needs help sometimes. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it. The offer had come that night. Not over dinner, but later, in a lawyer's office that smelled like expensive leather and older money. Dante had given her the address, told her to meet him there at 10 p.m. if she was interested. She'd gone, driven by desperation and a strange magnetic pull she didn't understand. The contract had been simple on its surface. A marriage of convenience. He needed a wife for legal and business reasons he didn't elaborate on. She needed protection, security, a fresh start. No physical relationship required. No emotional expectations. Just a legal arrangement that benefited them both. She could keep her job if she wanted or not. She could have her own space in his home. She could leave whenever she chose, though the contract had a 2-year minimum for the arrangement to serve its purpose. In exchange, he'd provide complete financial security, legal protection, and if she wanted, a new identity. The lawyer had explained everything in a monotone voice, clearly having done this before, though Aria couldn't imagine for whom. She should have asked more questions. Should have demanded to know why a man like Dante Morelli, clearly wealthy and powerful, needed to contract a wife. Should have wondered why he'd chosen her, a struggling waitress with her abusive ex-boyfriend and nothing to offer. But she'd been so tired, so afraid. And the idea of disappearing, of becoming someone Connor couldn't find, had been too tempting to resist. She'd signed her name at the bottom of the contract, her hand surprisingly steady, and watched Dante sign his. The lawyer had produced 2 rings from a drawer, simple bands of white gold. Dante had slid one onto her finger without ceremony, and she'd done the same for him, their first real touch. What time is it where you are right now? Are you listening alone? Because this story hits different when it's late and you're by yourself. The wedding had happened 3 days later in a courthouse, witnessed by the lawyer and a clerk who'd barely looked up from her phone. Dante had worn a suit. Aria had worn a blue dress she'd bought from a thrift store. They'd said their vows in voices devoid of emotion, signed the certificate, and then he'd driven her to the estate that would become her new home. The house was enormous, a modern mansion of glass and steel set on 5 acres of manicured grounds. High walls. Security cameras. A gate that required a code to open. Beautiful and impenetrable. He'd shown her to her room, a suite larger than her entire previous apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. This is yours, he'd said. You have complete privacy. The house has 7 bedrooms. I'm on the opposite wing. She'd nodded, overwhelmed by the luxury, by the strangeness of it all. The door has a lock, he'd continued. You're free to use it. I won't enter without permission. Thank you, she'd whispered. He'd paused at the door, his hand on the frame. One more thing, Aria. You're safe here. Whoever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, it ends now. Do you understand? She'd wanted to believe him. Part of her had. Yes. Good. Sleep well. And then he'd left, closing the door softly behind him, and Aria had stood in her beautiful new prison, wondering what she'd just agreed to. The first week had been surreal. Dante left early each morning, returned late each night. They saw each other primarily at dinner, meals prepared by a chef who came in daily and left covered dishes in the warmer. The conversations were polite, distant. How was your day? Fine. Do you need anything? No, thank you. The house is comfortable. Good. She'd explored the estate cautiously, discovering a library with thousands of books, a gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, a pool house and gardens that seemed to go on forever. Everything was perfect. Everything was empty. She'd quit her job at the restaurant, unable to face the questions her sudden marriage would raise. Dante had deposited money into a bank account in her name, more than she'd made in 6 months of waitressing. For expenses, he'd said. Buy whatever you need. The text messages from Connor had stopped completely 2 weeks after she'd moved in. At first, she'd been relieved, then suspicious. Connor didn't give up that easily. She'd checked her phone obsessively, waiting for the inevitable message, the late-night call. But her phone stayed silent, and slowly she'd begun to believe that maybe Dante's walls were high enough, that maybe she really had escaped. It was in the 3rd week that she'd found the gun. She'd been looking for a hairdryer in the master bathroom, the one attached to the bedroom Dante used, having wandered in there by accident when she'd gotten turned around in the enormous house. The drawer had been partially open, and there it was. A handgun, matte black, resting on a bed of velvet beside cufflinks and a watch that probably cost more than a car. She'd stared at it for a long moment, her breath caught in her throat, and then Dante's voice had come from behind her. "You can close that drawer now." She'd spun around, her heart racing. He'd been standing in the doorway, still in his suit from whatever business he'd attended that day, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was looking for... It's fine." He'd walked past her, closed the drawer with a soft click. "You have questions?" Arya had nodded, not trusting her voice. He'd gestured for her to sit on the edge of the massive bed, and after a moment's hesitation, she had. He'd remained standing, hands in his pockets, looking more like a businessman about to deliver a presentation than a husband explaining why he kept a weapon in his bathroom. "I told you I'd protect you. Did you think I meant with lawyers?" I didn't think about it." "You should have. The world I operate in isn't gentle area. I have enemies. People who would hurt those close to me to get to me. That gun and several others in this house exist to ensure your safety, not to frighten you. And what world is that?" He'd smiled then, a small, humorless curve of his mouth. The kind you don't ask too many questions about. She'd wanted to push, to demand real answers, but something in his eyes had stopped her. Instead, she'd asked a different question. "Has anyone ever tried to hurt someone close to you?" "Yes." "What happened to them?" "They regretted it." The conversation had ended there, Dante excusing himself to take a phone call, leaving Arya alone with the understanding that she'd married someone far more dangerous than she'd realized. But true to his word, he'd never been cruel to her. Never raised his voice. In fact, he rarely touched her at all, except for the occasional guiding hand on her back when they attended the one charity function he'd required her presence at, introducing her as his wife to a room full of people who'd looked at her with barely concealed curiosity. She'd started noticing other things after that. The way men stepped aside when Dante entered a room, even large, intimidating men who looked like they could break someone in half. The phone calls he took at odd hours, speaking rapid Italian in a voice that turned to ice. The driver who was clearly also a bodyguard who carried himself with military precision and had a barely concealed shoulder holster. The business dinners that stretched past midnight, that Dante returned from with blood on his knuckles once, which he'd washed off in the kitchen sink without explanation while Arya watched from the doorway, too afraid to ask. She was living with a stranger. A powerful, dangerous stranger who'd given her safety and luxury and distance. And somehow in the quiet dinners and careful politeness, she'd started to feel something she didn't want to name. Not love, not yet. But fascination, fear. And underneath it all, a pull she couldn't explain, like gravity. Now, sitting in his car as they pulled through the iron gates of the estate, Arya understood that every moment of the past 3 months had been choreographed. The distance he'd maintained, the safety he'd provided, even the gun in the drawer. All of it designed to make her comfortable, to make her trust him, to make her forget that she'd walked willingly into a cage. The car stopped in the circular driveway. Dante turned off the engine but made no move to exit. In the silence, Arya could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Longer than you want to know." "Tell me anyway." He turned to face her, and in the dim light from the dashboard, his eyes were almost black. 14 months. The number hit her like a physical blow. 14 months. That meant before Connor, while she was still with him, while she was still being broken down piece by piece, day by day. Where? Everywhere. The coffee shop where he screamed at you for forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. The grocery store where he made you cry in the parking lot. Your apartment the night you finally left him. I was there for all of it. Arya's hands were shaking. That's insane. That's stalking. Yes, Dante agreed calmly. It is all of those things. Then why? Why did you watch? Why didn't you help? He reached across the console and took her hand, his touch gentle despite the confession he was making. Because I needed to be sure. Sure of what? That when I finally took you, you'd have nowhere else to go. The truth of it, the calculated cruelty, should have made her recoil. Should have made her run. But his hand was warm around hers, and she realized with dawning horror that she wasn't afraid. She was something else entirely. You're a monster, she whispered. Perhaps. But I'm your monster now. And no one will ever hurt you again. He released her hand and exited the car, coming around to open her door. She stepped out on unsteady legs, and he guided her toward the house with that familiar hand on her back, proprietary and gentle. Inside, the house was silent, the staff long since gone for the evening. The foyer stretched before them, all marble and glass, beautiful and cold. Have you ever wanted something that terrified you? Someone who scared you and drew you in at the same time? You're not alone. Dante locked the door behind them, the sound of the bolt sliding home unnaturally loud. Then he turned to face her, leaning against the door with his arms crossed, watching her with that intense focus she'd grown accustomed to. Ask me, he said. Ask me what you really want to know. Arya's throat felt tight. Did you engineer our first meeting? Yes. The restaurant, your schedule, the table I sat at. All planned. Did you hack my phone? I had someone do it, yes. How else would I have known your new numbers? The contracts, the marriage, was any of it real? The marriage is legally binding. Whether it's real depends on your definition. Her anger was building now, hot and clarifying. You had no right. I had every right. You became mine the moment I decided you would be. People aren't possessions. In my world, they are. And you, Arya, you were always going to be mine. It was just a question of when. She wanted to scream at him, to rage against the manipulation, the control. But underneath the anger was something more complicated. Because hadn't she felt it too? That pull, that sense of inevitability. Hadn't there been a part of her that had wanted to be chosen, to be claimed, even by someone dangerous? What about Connor? What did you do to him? Dante pushed off from the door, walking slowly toward her. After you moved in, I paid him a visit. Made it clear that if he contacted you again, there would be consequences. He thought I was bluffing. So I demonstrated that I wasn't. How? I destroyed one of his properties. A rental building he'd just purchased with investor money. Electrical fire. No one was hurt, but the insurance didn't cover it. He understood the message. That's why he stopped texting. But you didn't stop there, did you? You kept watching him, waiting. No, I kept destroying him. Slowly, methodically. Because he'd touched what was mine, and that required punishment. You're insane. Dante stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm obsessed. There's a difference. With me? With the idea of you. With a woman I watched refuse to break even when he did everything he could to shatter you. With the strength you didn't even know you had. I wanted that strength for myself. Arya's breath was coming faster now. This isn't love. No, Dante agreed. It's ownership. It's possession. It's the absolute certainty that you belong to me and no one else will ever touch you again. Call it what you want. I call it inevitable. She should walk away. Should demand he let her leave. But her feet stayed planted, her body betraying her, leaning almost imperceptibly toward him. You planned all of this. The mall, Connor humiliating me, you being there. Did you? He smiled, and it was predatory. I knew he couldn't resist. Men like Connor need to assert dominance. I made sure he knew where you'd be today. Anonymous message, your location, a suggestion that you'd be vulnerable. He took the bait exactly as I knew he would. And then you swept in like some savior. I am your savior, Arya. I'm also your captor. Both things can be true. She raised her hand and slapped him, the crack echoing through the foyer. His head barely moved, and when he looked back at her, there was something like approval in his eyes. Good. There's the fire. Don't lose it. I hate you. No, you don't. You hate that you want me. There's a difference. I don't want you. Your pulse is racing. Your pupils are dilated. You're leaning toward me even as you claim to hate me. Your body knows what your mind doesn't want to accept yet. And what's that? That you've never felt as desired as you do right now? That all of Connor's abuse, all of his control, it made you feel small. But my obsession makes you feel powerful. Doesn't it? Arya's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I know you take your coffee with cream and 2 sugars. I know you read before bed, always fiction, usually romance. I know you had a nightmare last Tuesday and couldn't sleep until 4 a.m. I know you hum when you're cooking and that you always double-check that the doors are locked. I know you better than you know yourself. That's not possible. It is when someone becomes your entire focus for over a year. When did this start? When did you decide? The day I saw him make you apologize for his cruelty. You were standing outside a coffee shop, and he was screaming at you about something trivial, his dry cleaning or his schedule, I don't remember. But I remember your face. The way you made yourself smaller. The way you said sorry even though you'd done nothing wrong. And I thought, she deserves better. She deserves someone who would burn the world down before letting anyone make her feel that way. So you decided to be that person. I decided to be your person. Whether you wanted me or not. That's not romantic. It's terrifying. Good. You should be terrified. Fear means you understand the depth of what you've gotten into. But here's what you need to understand, Arya. I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. The contract has a 2-year minimum, she said weakly. The contract is irrelevant. You're my wife in every way that matters. And I protect what's mine. What if I want to leave? Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. Then you leave. I won't stop you. But ask yourself, where would you go? Back to that studio apartment with the broken heater? Back to jumping at shadows, waiting for Connor to find you? Back to struggling to pay rent, to working double shifts, to being invisible? I've given you safety, luxury, protection. I've destroyed the man who hurt you. And all I ask in return is that you accept what you already know. What's that? That you belong here. With me. The tears fell now, hot and unbidden, and she hated herself for them. You're manipulating me. Yes. Does that make it less true? She wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that everything she felt was manufactured, a product of his control. But standing there in the foyer of this beautiful house, with his hand on her face and his dark eyes seeing every part of her, she couldn't lie to herself anymore. Part of her, a part she was ashamed to acknowledge, liked this. Liked being wanted with this intensity. Liked having someone who would destroy her enemies without being asked. Liked the safety of his obsession even as it terrified her. I need time, she whispered. Take it. I've waited 14 months. I can wait a little longer. But know this, he leaned in close, his breath warm against her ear. Every day you stay here, you're choosing me. Every dinner we share, every night you sleep under my roof, you're accepting what we are. And when you're ready to stop fighting it, I'll be waiting. He released her and stepped back, the absence of his touch leaving her cold. Your room is still yours. The lock still works. Use it if you need to. But we both know you won't. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the depths of the house, leaving Arya alone with the truth she didn't want to face. She was trapped. But the cage was gilded, and she was starting to forget why she'd wanted to escape in the first place. The week that followed was a strange kind of torture. Dante returned to his pattern of distance, leaving early, returning late, their only interaction at dinner. But everything had changed. Now she understood that every moment was calculated, that his absence was as much a manipulation as his presence. She stayed in her room most of the time, trying to think, to plan, to figure out what she wanted. But her thoughts kept circling back to him, to the way he'd looked at her in the foyer, to the confession of his obsession, to the terrible seductive promise that she was safe, wanted, claimed. On the 3rd day, she found a gift outside her door, A first edition of her favorite book, Pride and Prejudice, wrapped in brown paper with no note. She knew it was from him. On the 5th day, fresh flowers appeared in her room, tulips in soft pink, her favorite, though she'd never told him. How did he know? The same way he knew everything else. He'd been watching. On the 7th day, she found him in the library at 2 a.m. She'd come down for tea, unable to sleep, and there he was, sitting in a leather chair with a glass of whiskey, still wearing his suit from whatever business had kept him out until this ungodly hour. He looked up when she entered, unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting her. Can't sleep. She shook her head, hovering in the doorway. Neither can I, he admitted. Sit with me. It wasn't a command this time, just an invitation. She found herself crossing the room, settling into the chair across from him. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. Why me? She finally asked. Of all the women you could have chosen, why me? He took a sip of his whiskey, considering the question. Because you're strong in ways you don't recognize. Because Connor tried to break you and failed. Because when I saw you, I saw someone worth keeping. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. You just don't like it. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. I'm not strong. You left him. That takes strength. I had no choice. There's always a choice. You chose to survive. That matters. The silence settled again, less uncomfortable this time. Do you regret it? He asked. The contract. The marriage. Me, I don't know, she said honestly. Ask me something else. Anything. Anything. Why did you really need a wife? For the reason I told you. Legal protection. In my line of work, having a spouse provides certain privileges. Asset protection. Legal immunities. A wife can't be compelled to testify against her husband. Is that all I am? A legal shield? No. But it's part of what you are. And the rest? He set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The rest is complicated. Try me. The rest is that I'm not a good man, Arya. I've done things that would horrify you. I've hurt people. Killed people. Built an empire on violence and fear. And somewhere along the way I forgot what it felt like to want something beyond power. Then I saw you, and I remembered. So I'm what, your redemption? God, no. You're my damnation. Because wanting you makes me weaker. Caring about your safety means I have vulnerabilities my enemies can exploit. But I can't stop. I've tried. I can't unknow you. You're saying you care about me. I'm saying I'm obsessed with you. It's not the same thing. It could be. Not in my world. In my world, love is a liability. Obsession is survival. She should find that horrifying. She did find it horrifying. But she also found it honest in a way Connor never had been. I don't know how to do this, she confessed. How to be in this, whatever this is. You don't have to know. Just stay. Let me protect you. Let me keep you safe. And if I can't, if I need to leave, then you leave. But you won't. How do you know? Because you're already starting to understand what I understood 14 months ago. What's that? That we're inevitable. The certainty in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it settled over her like a truth she'd been avoiding. She stood, suddenly restless, and walked to the window. The grounds were dark beyond the glass, lit only by security lights that cast long shadows across the lawn. If I stay, she said slowly, if I accept this, what happens? We build something. What kind of something? I don't know. Something neither of us has had before. Something real. She turned to face him. You said yourself love is a liability in your world. I said love. I didn't say we couldn't have something else. Something more honest. What's more honest than love? Possession that doesn't pretend to be anything else. Desire without the pretty lies. Protection without the expectation of gratitude. She walked back to her chair, sat down, looked him directly in the eyes. And if I want more than that? Eventually. Then we'll renegotiate. But first, you have to stop fighting what you already want. And what do I want? Me. The word hung between them, simple and undeniable. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but she was tired of lying to herself. Maybe you're right, she admitted quietly. Maybe I do. But that doesn't mean I'm ready. I know. That's why I'm waiting. How long will you wait? As long as it takes. His phone buzzed then, a harsh sound in the quiet library. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "I have to take this." She nodded, standing. "Good night, Dante." "Good night, Aria." She left him there, but as she climbed the stairs to her room, she realized something had shifted. She'd stopped thinking of escape, started thinking of surrender, and she wasn't sure if that terrified her or relieved her. 2 weeks later, Connor called. Not her phone, but the house line, a number she didn't even know existed until the house phone rang at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Aria was in the kitchen making coffee, and she stared at the ringing device like it was a snake. On the 5th ring, she answered. "Lord, Aria. Oh God, Aria, please. Please, you have to help me." Connor's voice was desperate, shaking, nothing like the confident performance artist from the mall. "I don't have to do anything for you. Please, I'm begging you. Tell your husband to stop. Tell him I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, just make him stop." "What are you talking about?" "My business, my investors. Everything's falling apart. Properties I own are having accidents. My clients are dropping me. Someone sent my entire investor list proof that I've been embezzling. My life is being destroyed, and I know it's him. I know it's your husband. Please, Aria, make him stop." She should feel triumphant, vindicated. But mostly she just felt tired. "You did this to yourself, Connor. I did nothing. You humiliated me. You stole from me. You made my life hell for over a year. Whatever's happening to you now, you earned it. I know I did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never should have, just please. Please." He was crying now, actual tears she could hear through the phone. The man who'd made her cry so many times reduced to this. She found she felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just nothing. "I can't help you. Aria, please. Goodbye, Connor." She hung up as he was still pleading and stood in the kitchen staring at the phone. She should tell Dante about the call. Should ask him to stop, maybe. Should feel something other than this cold, hollow emptiness. Instead, she poured her coffee and went to sit in the garden, where the morning sun was warm on her face and the high walls kept the world at bay. She didn't mention the call to Dante that night at dinner, or the next night, or the night after that. It felt like a test, though she wasn't sure what she was testing. His omniscience, her own complicity. On the 4th day, Dante brought it up himself. "Connor called you. It wasn't a question." "Yes." "And?" "And I told him I couldn't help him." Dante nodded, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "Did you want to help him?" "No." "Good. Is that all you have to say?" "What else would you like me to say?" "I don't know." "Maybe explain why you're destroying a man's entire life." "I'm not destroying his life. I'm removing his ability to hurt people. There's a difference. By bankrupting him, by exposing him. Everything that's happening to Connor now is a consequence of his own actions. I'm simply making sure those consequences can't be avoided or talked away. You're enjoying this." Dante set down his knife and fork, giving her his full attention. "Yes, I am. I'm enjoying watching a man who abused you lose everything he used to make himself feel powerful. Does that bother you?" She thought about it, really thought about it. It should bother me. But it doesn't. That bothers me. Why? Because it means you're changing me. Making me like you. No. I'm revealing the parts of you that were always there. The parts Connor tried to kill. The parts that want justice, that want to see him suffer the way he made you suffer. That's not who I am, isn't it? You hung up on him while he was begging. You didn't tell me about the call because you wanted to see how far I'd go. You're sitting here now asking questions, but you haven't once asked me to stop, have you? No. So perhaps you're more like me than you want to admit. Or perhaps, she met his eyes across the table, you're turning me into you. Would that be so terrible? Yes. Because I don't want to be the kind of person who enjoys someone else's suffering, even when they deserve it, especially then. That's when it's most dangerous. Dante smiled, a real smile this time, warm with something like affection. You'll keep me honest then? I doubt that. Try anyway. The conversation moved on to other things, but Aria couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. She hadn't asked him to stop, and they both knew what that meant. 3 days later, Connor showed up at the estate. Arya was in the garden when it happened, reading in the late afternoon sun, enjoying the peace. She didn't hear him approach until he was standing 10 feet away, having somehow gotten past the gate, past the security. He looked terrible. Unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes wild with desperation and rage. Arya's book fell from her hands. "Connor, what are you? How did you did this?" His voice was shaking. "You and your fucking husband. You destroyed me. I haven't, don't lie. Don't you dare lie to me. I've lost everything. My business, my reputation, my investors, everything. And it's because of you. You need to leave." Connor took a step forward, and Arya stood, her heart racing. "Or what? You'll call your attack dog? Let him come. I have nothing left to lose." "That's not true. You still have your life. For now." "Is that a threat?" Connor laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "From me. I'm not the one with the mafia husband, Arya. I'm not the one who married a killer to get revenge. I didn't marry him for revenge. I married him to get away from you. And how's that working out? You traded one prison for another. At least I never pretended to be anything other than what I was." She felt anger rise, hot and clarifying. "You're right. You never pretended. You were always a manipulative, abusive, pathetic excuse for a man. And I was stupid enough to love you anyway. But I'm not stupid anymore. No, now you're just vindictive. Sending your husband after me like some kind of Connor." Dante's voice cut through the garden like a blade. "I'm going to give you 5 seconds to step away from my wife." Arya turned to see Dante standing 20 feet away, having appeared from nowhere, his presence utterly calm and absolutely terrifying. Connor spun to face him. 5 seconds or what? Or I stop being reasonable. Connor's laugh was tinged with hysteria. "Reasonable? You call what you've done to me reasonable? Everything I've done to you is a direct response to what you did to Arya. You abused her, gaslit her, stole from her, isolated her. And when she finally escaped, you continued to harass her. So yes, I've dismantled your life piece by piece. And I'll continue to do so until there's nothing left." "You're insane." "No, I'm protective. There's a difference." Connor's hands clenched into fists. "She's not worth it. She's not worth any of this. She's a nobody. A worthless, broken." She didn't see Dante move. One moment he was standing 20 feet away, the next he had Connor by the throat, slammed against the garden wall with a force that knocked the breath from Connor's lungs. Arya gasped, taking an involuntary step forward. "Finish that sentence," Dante said quietly, his voice colder than Arya had ever heard it. "Please." "Finish it so I have an excuse to break something." Connor's face was turning red, his hands clawing uselessly at Dante's wrist. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't good enough." Apologized to her. To Arya. "I'm louder." Connor's eyes found Arya's, terrified and pleading. "I'm sorry, Arya. I'm sorry for everything. For hurting you, for everything. Please." Dante held him there a moment longer, then released him. Connor slid down the wall, gasping for air. "You're going to leave now," Dante said conversationally. "And you're never going to come back. You're never going to speak her name. You're never going to think about her. You're going to take what's left of your miserable life and you're going to disappear. And if you don't, if I ever hear that you've so much as driven past this house, I will do things to you that will make what I've already done seem like mercy. Do you understand?" Connor nodded, still gasping, and stumbled to his feet. He didn't look at Arya as he half ran toward the gate, which was now open, security guards flanking it like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Which, Arya realized, they probably had been. When Connor was gone, when the gate had closed behind him and they were alone in the garden again, Arya finally found her voice. "You let him in." Dante turned to face her. "Yes. You wanted this. I wanted you to see him powerless. I wanted you to see that he can't hurt you anymore. I wanted," he stopped, an unusual hesitation. "What?" "I wanted you to see what I'd do to protect you. Even when you didn't ask for it. You used me as bait. I used the situation to prove a point. She should be angry. Should rage at him for the manipulation, for the risk. But watching Connor reduced to a begging, broken thing, watching Dante defend her with such absolute certainty, she felt something else entirely. "You're terrifying," she said softly. "I know. And you're exactly what you said you were. Obsessed. Possessive. Dangerous. Yes. She took a step toward him, then another. I should hate you for this. But you don't. No, I don't. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Why not? Because she stopped, trying to find the words. Because Connor made me feel small and you make me feel powerful. Seen. Those are the same thing. Maybe. She was close enough to touch him now, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the careful control he was maintaining. You've been waiting for this, she said. For what? For me to stop fighting. Yes. And... She reached up, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his face. The same gesture he'd used on her in the foyer weeks ago. I'm tired of fighting. Then don't. I'm afraid. Of me? Of this. Of what it means. It means you're mine, and I'm yours. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple. No. But it's true. She could feel his heartbeat under her palm, could see something in his eyes that looked almost vulnerable. If I do this, if I choose this, you don't get to hurt me. I would never. You already have. By lying. By manipulating. By taking away my choices. His hand came up to cover hers. You're right. I have. And I can't promise I won't make decisions you disagree with. I can't promise to always ask permission. But I can promise that every action I take will be to protect you. To keep you safe. To keep you mine. That's not enough. What would be enough? Honesty. No more secrets. No more watching without telling me. No more engineered situations. If you're going to control my life, I need to at least know about it. Dante was quiet for a long moment. That's fair. You agree? I agree to try. To tell you more than I have been. To bring you into decisions that affect you. But I can't promise complete transparency. My work, no, I don't need to know about your work. I need to know about us. That I can do. She searched his face, looking for deception, but found only intensity. Okay, I'll stay. I'll stop fighting. I'll be yours. But you have to let me be a partner in this. Not just a possession. Partners, then. He pulled her closer, his arms coming around her. But you're still mine. Always mine. She nodded against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. And you're mine. That's new. Is it? You've owned me for 3 months. I've just been waiting for you to claim it. She pulled back enough to look at him. I'm claiming it now. Good. Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. Not gentle or tentative, but consuming, desperate, like he'd been holding back for months and couldn't anymore. She kissed him back with equal intensity, months of tension and fear and desire pouring out in that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. No more separate rooms. No more distance. She nodded. No more distance. He took her hand and led her inside, through the house she'd been living in but never really inhabiting, to his room in the opposite wing. She'd never been inside before, had respected the boundary he'd established. It was masculine, dark wood in deep colors, dominated by a massive bed. This is ours now, he said. Everything I have is yours. She turned to face him, this man who'd orchestrated her entire life, who'd watched her suffer and then claimed her. This dangerous, obsessive, terrifying man who made her feel more wanted than she'd ever felt in her life. Show me, she said. Show me what it means to be yours. And he did. Hours later, tangled in sheets that smelled like him, Arya stared at the ceiling and tried to process what she'd done. She'd surrendered. Completely. Given herself over to a man who'd admitted to stalking her, manipulating her, controlling her life. And she didn't regret it. That should horrify her. Instead, she felt safe. Chosen. Claimed. Dante's arm was heavy across her waist, his breathing deep and even beside her. She turned her head to look at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd decided she was worth destroying his own carefully maintained distance for. Are you awake? She whispered. Yes. Do you regret it? Any of it? No. Not for a second. Even though it makes you vulnerable? Especially because of that. Being vulnerable to you, it's the only kind of vulnerability I've ever wanted. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. What happens now? Now we build something real, something honest, something neither of us has had before. What if Connor comes back? He won't. You sound certain. I am. He knows what I'll do if he tries. What will you do? Whatever I have to. She should push for details, should demand to know exactly what he meant. But she found she didn't want to know. Didn't need to know. It was enough that Connor was gone, that the text messages had stopped, that she could breathe without fear. I would have done it myself, you know, she said quietly. What? Destroyed him. If I'd had the power, the resources, the knowledge, I would have done exactly what you did. I know. That's why I fell for you. You didn't fall. You don't fall. You obsess. Same thing. It's really not. For me it is. She turned in his arms until they were face to face. Teach me. Teach you what? How to be like you. How to be powerful. How to make sure no one ever makes me feel small again. Arya, you promised me partnership. That means teaching me how your world works. You don't want to be part of my world. I'm already part of it. I married you. That makes me part of it whether I want to be or not. So teach me how to survive it. He studied her face for a long moment. You're serious. Completely. This will change you. I know. You won't be able to go back. I don't want to go back. There's nothing to go back to. All right. We start tomorrow. She smiled. Tomorrow. For now, sleep. We both need it. She settled against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and closed her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. Not because she was hidden, but because she was claimed. And she was starting to understand that maybe in Dante's world those were the same thing. The next 6 weeks were a revelation. Dante began bringing her into his world slowly, carefully. Not the violence, not yet, but the business side. The legitimate holdings that fronted for less legitimate operations. The network of people who owed him favors. The web of power and influence he'd spent years building. She learned fast. How to read people. How to spot deception. How to use fear without creating enemies. How to negotiate from a position of strength. How to make people believe they'd won when they'd actually lost. Dante was a patient teacher, and she was a dedicated student. I would have done it myself, you know, she said quietly. What? Destroyed him. If I'd had the power, the resources, the knowledge, I would have done exactly what you did. I know. That's why I fell for you. You didn't fall. You don't fall. You obsess. Same thing. It's really not. For me it is. But more than the lessons in power, she learned about Dante himself. The scars on his body, each with a story. The nightmares he sometimes had, waking up ready to fight before he remembered where he was. The rare moments of softness when he'd read beside her in the library or cook breakfast on Sunday mornings. The way he touched her, possessive and gentle at once, like she was something precious he couldn't quite believe he got to keep. And she found herself changing. Not into someone she didn't recognize, but into a stronger version of who she'd always been. The woman who'd survived Connor had been resilient. The woman Dante was helping her become was formidable. She started accompanying him to business dinners, learning to navigate conversations laden with double meanings. Started understanding the glances and gestures that communicated entire negotiations. Started building her own network of contacts, people who respected her not just as Dante's wife, but as someone worth knowing in her own right. And through it all, their relationship deepened into something neither of them had expected. Not love, not exactly, but something more honest. Possession that went both ways. Obsession that was mutual. Trust built not on pretty words, but on absolute certainty. Until one night, 8 weeks after Connor's final visit, Arya got a phone call that changed everything. It was Madison, Connor's ex-girlfriend, the one Dante had mentioned that day in the mall. The one Connor had borrowed money from. I thought you should know, Madison said without preamble. Connor's dead. The words didn't register at first. What? Connor. He killed himself 2 days ago. They found him in his apartment. Overdose. Left a note and everything. Arya sat down hard on the edge of the bed. She was in her old room, gathering some books she'd left there, and the familiar space suddenly felt surreal. How do you know? I still talk to some of his friends. They called me. Thought I'd want to know. The note he mentioned you. Said it was all your fault. That you'd destroyed his life. That your husband had taken everything from him and he couldn't live with it anymore. Arya's mind was racing. I didn't. I'm not blaming you, Madison cut her off. God, I'm not. I just thought you should hear it from someone who understood. Connor he was abusive. To me too. Whatever happened to him, whatever your husband did, Connor brought it on himself. Still, I thought you'd want to know. Thank you for telling me. Are you okay? I don't know. Call me if you need to talk. Someone who gets it, you know. Yeah, thanks. Arya hung up and sat in the silence, trying to process. Connor was dead. The man who'd terrorized her, who'd stolen from her, who'd made her question her own sanity. Dead by his own hand, unable to live with the consequences of his actions. She should feel something. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. Or sadness for the waste of it all. But she felt nothing. Empty. Dante found her there 20 minutes later, still sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. What's wrong? Connor's dead. He killed himself. Dante's expression didn't change. When? 2 days ago. Overdose. Left a note blaming me. Us. For destroying his life. I see. That's all you have to say. What would you like me to say? I don't know. Something. He was a waste of oxygen who made the world worse by being in it. His death is a net positive. Jesus, Dante. I'm not going to pretend to mourn someone who abused you. Neither should you. I'm not mourning him. I'm just processing. Fair. He sat beside her on the bed. How do you feel? I don't know. Empty. Like I should feel something, but I don't. That's normal. Is it? When someone who hurt you is suddenly gone. Yes. Part of you probably wanted this. Wanted him gone permanently. So there's guilt for getting what you wanted, and confusion because you don't feel what you think you should feel. She looked at him. Is that how you feel when people in your life disappear? Sometimes. Depends on who they were and why they're gone. Did you... She stopped, not sure she wanted to know the answer. What? Did you have anything to do with this? With Connor's death? Dante met her eyes steadily. No, he killed himself. I had nothing to do with it beyond creating the circumstances that made him want to die. But I didn't kill him. I believe you. Do you? Yes. Because you would tell me if you had. I told you I'd be more honest. I meant it. They sat in silence for a moment. I should feel relieved, Arya said finally. Part of me does. But part of me feels guilty. Yes. Don't. Connor made his choice. You're not responsible for his inability to face consequences. But we drove him to it. I drove him to it. By exposing him for what he was. By removing his ability to charm and manipulate his way out of accountability. Would you rather I'd let him continue hurting people? No. Then don't second-guess what happened. He was a predator. Predators don't stop until they're stopped. You stopped him. We stopped him. She leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I'm a terrible person. Why? Because I don't feel worse about this. Because part of me is glad he's gone. That doesn't make you terrible. It makes you human. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. There is. Terrible people enjoy causing suffering for its own sake. You're not that. You just understand that sometimes suffering is a consequence of justice. That's very philosophical for someone who destroys people's lives for a living. I contain multitudes. She laughed, a small, broken sound. What do we do now? Now we go to the charity gala we're supposed to attend. We show the world that we're strong and united and completely unbothered by the death of your abusive ex. We live our lives. I don't know if I can do that. Pretend nothing happened. You're not pretending nothing happened. You're acknowledging that what happened doesn't define you. There's a difference. She pulled back to look at him. How are you so calm about this? Practice. I've seen a lot of death area. Some of it I caused. Some of it I witnessed. All of it taught me that life goes on. The people who survive are the ones who keep moving forward. Is that what we're doing? Surviving? No, we're thriving. There's a difference. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that she could move past this, that Connor's death was just another chapter closing. but something in her felt irrevocably changed. And you're not bothered at all. That he's dead. That he killed himself because of what you did to him. Should I be? I destroyed a predator's ability to hurt people. If he chose death over accountability, that's on him, not me. You really believe that? I know it. And so do you, even if you're not ready to admit it yet. Maybe. She stood, smoothing down her dress. The gala's in 2 hours. I should get ready. Arya, she turned back. What? You're stronger than you think. And whatever you're feeling right now, it's okay. There's no wrong way to process this. Thank you. For what? For not telling me how I should feel. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. I would never do that. Your feelings are yours. I just want you to know that whatever they are, they're valid. Even if they're terrible, especially then. She held him for a moment, drawing strength from his certainty. Then she went to get ready for the gala, to put on her armor and face the world as Mrs. Morelli, wife of one of Chicago's most dangerous men. The woman she was becoming, whether she was ready or not. The gala was exactly what she'd expected. Glittering and false, full of people wearing expensive clothes and fake smiles. She and Dante moved through the crowd like royalty, people parting for them, everyone wanting a moment of their attention. And then she saw him. Connor. Except it wasn't Connor, couldn't be Connor because Connor was dead. But for one heart-stopping moment she could have sworn. Arya. Dante's hand tightened on her waist. Are you all right? I thought I saw you didn't. He's gone. I know. She shook off the momentary vertigo. Just my imagination. Of course it was. They continued through the crowd, but Arya couldn't shake the feeling that Connor's ghost was following her. Not literally, but in the weight of knowing he was dead. That she'd played a part in it. That she didn't feel worse about it. Near the bar, she recognized someone. Madison, Connor's ex, the one who'd called her. Their eyes met across the room, and Madison gave her a small, understanding nod. 2 women who'd survived the same man, connected by trauma and relief. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering if she runs or if she stays. You're wondering if fear can become something else. Don't click away, because what happens next is going to break you. As the night wore on, Arya found herself watching the other couples. Wondering if any of them had relationships as complicated as hers. If any of them had been claimed and manipulated and obsessed over. If any of them was standing beside someone who'd systematically destroyed another human being for their sake. Probably not. Most relationships were simpler. Easier. But also, she suspected, less honest. She and Dante didn't pretend. Didn't dress up their darkness in pretty words. They were what they were, and there was freedom in that acknowledgement. Would you stop him if someone was destroying your abuser piece by piece? Would you tell them to stop, or would you watch? Near the end of the evening, a man approached them. Older, distinguished, clearly wealthy. Mr. Morelli, he said, extending a hand. It's been too long. Antonio, Dante replied, shaking hands. May I introduce my wife, Arya? Arya, this is Antonio Castellano. Old family friend. Mrs. Morelli, Antonio said, taking her hand and brushing a kiss across her knuckles. Congratulations on your marriage. I've heard so much about you. Have you? All good things, I assure you. You've quite captured our friend here's attention. Dante's never been one for grand gestures, but marriage, well, that's quite the gesture. Arya smiled politely, understanding the subtext. Antonio was fishing for information, trying to understand why Dante had suddenly married. I'm very fortunate, she said carefully. As is Dante. They spent a few more minutes in polite conversation before Antonio excused himself. The moment he was out of earshot, Arya turned to Dante. He was testing me. Yes. Did I pass? With flying colors. What would have happened if I hadn't? He would have assumed you were a weakness to exploit, and tried to use you against me. And now? Now he knows you're my partner. That makes you untouchable. She felt a flush of pride at that. Untouchable. Protected not because she was weak, but because she was strong. This is what you've been teaching me, she said. How to navigate this world. How to be an asset instead of a liability. Yes. And you're learning fast. Good. Because I'm tired of being protected. I want to be powerful in my own right. You already are. You just didn't know it. Now you do. 3 months later, Arya stood in the same mall where Connor had humiliated her. She wasn't there by accident. She'd chosen to come, chosen to face the memory. The atrium looked the same, shoppers moving through with bags and phones, completely unaware of what had happened here. She walked to the spot where she'd stood, where Connor had pointed at her and lied, where Dante had claimed her in front of a crowd. A year ago, she'd been broken here. Today, she was whole. Her phone buzzed. Dante, where are you? The mall. Northridge. The one where, yes. Why? Facing ghosts. Do you need me to come? No, I'm okay. I know you are. But the offer stands. Thank you. I'll be home soon. Take your time. I'll be waiting. She pocketed her phone and took one last look at the atrium. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the past where it belonged. Behind her. When she got home, Dante was in his office working on something that probably involved money laundering or worse. She didn't ask anymore. Didn't need to. She had her own projects now, her own network, her own power base. They were partners in every sense of the word. Hey, she said from the doorway. Hey yourself, how was your pilgrimage? Cathartic. Good. He set down his pen, gave her his full attention. What did you learn? That I'm not that person anymore. The one who let him break me. The one who apologized for existing. I'm someone else now. Who are you now? She crossed to him, settled herself in his lap, felt his arms come around her automatically. I'm someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space. Someone who knows her own power. Someone who chose the cage and made it a kingdom. His smile was genuine, warm. I'm proud of you. For what? For becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. And who's that? Mine. She kissed him, deep and certain. You. Always yours. But also my own. That's the same thing. With us, yes. It is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Dante's hands absently stroking her back, Arya's head resting on his shoulder. Outside the windows, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. If you could go back, Dante asked quietly, to that first night in the lawyer's office, knowing everything you know now, would you still sign? Yes. Without hesitation. Without hesitation. Even knowing I stalked you. Manipulated you? Took away your choices, even knowing all of that. Why? Because you also gave me power, purpose, protection. You saw me when I was invisible. You wanted me when I felt unwanted. And you made me strong enough to stand beside you instead of behind you. That's worth everything else. He held her tighter. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you have me anyway. Forever? Forever. That's a long time. I'm aware. What if you get tired of me? Won't happen. You sound certain. I am. I've been obsessed with you for over 2 years now. It's not going away. Good. Because I'm obsessed right back. That's new. Is it? I think I've been obsessed since that first Friday at the restaurant. I just didn't have a name for it. She traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. We're terrible people, aren't we? Probably. Does it bother you? Not even a little. Me neither. They sat there as the sun finished setting, as the office fell into shadow, two terrible people who'd found each other and decided that was enough. Outside, the world continued on, unaware that in this house behind high walls, a woman who'd once been broken was now whole. That she'd been claimed and caged and had learned to love her captivity. That she'd become exactly what her husband had promised she would, someone powerful and dangerous and utterly, completely his. And she wouldn't have it any other way. If you've made it this far, you're part of this now, you've watched her. Transform, you've watched him claim her, subscribe, because their story doesn't end here. And you're going to want to see what happens when obsession becomes something even darker, Comment claimed if you understood why she stayed. 6 months after Connor's death, Arya received a package. No return address, just her name written in elegant script. She opened it carefully, half expecting something dangerous. Inside was a journal. Connor's journal. And a note. Thought you should have this. You earned it. Madison. Arya sat in the library, the journal heavy in her hands. She should throw it away. Should burn it. Should do anything but open it and read the private thoughts of a dead man. But she opened it anyway. The entries started from 2 years ago, back when she and Connor had first started dating. Reading them was like looking into a funhouse mirror, seeing their relationship through his distorted perception. He'd written about her like she was a project, someone to mold and shape. He'd documented his strategies for isolating her, for making her doubt herself, for breaking down her confidence piece by piece. It was systematic, calculated, cruel, and he'd enjoyed it. Halfway through, she found the entry about their breakup. His rage poured off the page. How dare she leave? How dare she think she could do better? He'd planned to make her come back. To make her so miserable, so afraid, that she'd have no choice but to return to him. The final entries, written in the weeks before his death, were different. Desperate, afraid. He'd known Dante was destroying him, had understood finally what it felt like to be powerless, and he'd hated it. The last entry was dated the day before his death. She's won. She found someone who protects her the way I never did. Someone who sees her value. Someone who won't let me touch her. I've lost everything. And it's because I underestimated her. I thought she was weak. But she was strong enough to leave. Strong enough to find better. Strong enough to watch me burn. I can't live with that. Can't live knowing she's out there happy, safe, loved. So I won't. Arya closed the journal, her hands shaking. She should feel victorious. He'd admitted defeat. Admitted she'd won. But mostly she just felt tired. Dante found her there an hour later, still holding the journal. What's that? Connor's journal. Madison sent it to me. He took it from her, flipped through a few pages, his expression darkening. Bastard. Yeah. She watched him read, saw the muscle in his jaw tick with suppressed rage. You can't be angry at a dead man. Watch me. He threw the journal into the fireplace and they both watched it burn. That's the past, Dante said. It doesn't get to follow you anymore. It already doesn't. I know. But I needed you to see it anyway. To understand. Understand what? That you were never wrong to leave him. That you were never weak for loving him. That everything he did to you was calculated and intentional and not your fault. I know that. Good. The journal burned, pages curling and blackening, and Arya felt something release in her chest. The last ghost of her old life finally laid to rest. Where do you think obsession ends and love begins? Or are they the same thing when the stakes are this high? Let me know in the comments. And if this story kept you here for the entire ride, you know exactly what kind of love you believe in. A year to the day after their marriage, Dante surprised her. He'd been secretive all week, deflecting her questions with that infuriating half-smile. On their anniversary, he led her out to the garden where they'd first admitted what they were to each other. The space had been transformed. Lights strung through the trees. Candles everywhere. A table set for two. It's beautiful, she breathed. You deserve beautiful. They ate dinner under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. About the year that had passed. About the future stretching before them. About the empire they were building together. When dessert was finished, Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. What's this? Open it. Inside was a new ring. Not a replacement for her wedding band, but something to go with it. A sapphire, deep blue, surrounded by diamonds. It's stunning. Read the inscription. She tilted it toward the candlelight. Inevitable. I told you that the night you stopped fighting. That we were inevitable. This is a reminder, a promise. What are you promising? That I will never stop choosing you. That my obsession will never fade. That you will always be mine, and I will always be yours. That this, us, is inevitable and eternal and exactly what we both needed even when we didn't know it. She slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. They fit together perfectly. I have something for you too. You didn't have to, I wanted to. She pulled out her own small box, handed it to him. He opened it to find a watch. Expensive, elegant, with an inscription of its own. You're mine. He laughed, actually laughed. Possessive. I learned from the best. He put it on immediately. Now we match. Partners in obsession. Partners in everything. He stood, offered his hand. Dance with me. There's no music. There's always music if you listen close enough. So they danced in the garden to the sound of wind in the trees and distant traffic and their own beating hearts. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to build something beautiful from it. When the song only they could hear ended, Dante pulled her close. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Morelli. Happy anniversary. Do you regret it? Any of it?" "Not for a second." "Good. Because I'm never letting you go." "I know. That's why I'm staying." They stayed in the garden until the candles burned down and the stars wheeled overhead. Two terrible people who'd found their perfect match. Two damaged souls who'd decided that broken together was better than whole apart. And when they finally went inside, hand in hand, Arya looked back at the garden one last time. A year ago, she'd surrendered here, given up fighting and accepted what she'd become. Tonight, she celebrated it. Because the cage Dante had built for her had bars made of gold and walls made of devotion and a lock she held the key to. She could leave any time she wanted. She just never wanted to. And that, she thought as Dante pulled her close in their bed, was the most honest kind of love there was. The kind that chose its cage. The kind that turned captivity into freedom. The kind that understood that sometimes being owned and being free were exactly the same thing.